see some kind of indication that we are live. I see it now. So hopefully people will begin to trickle in and join us. And while we're waiting on them, we can get started anyway. And I will say that, hello, I am Kelly, host of Boobies and Noobies, the romance novel review podcast. And I am here with some amazing guests today to talk about this month's Tit Talk. I don't know what I was thinking when I came up with that title. This month's Tit Talk topic, which is discrete covers in romance, yay or nay. And I have to say, the reason I wanted to talk about this topic is we are all on this panel on Booktok. All four of us are pretty present in the world of TikTok as it relates to romance novels. And you see the same topics come up time and time again on Booktok, and discrete covers is one of them that I have seen discussed many a times, both in a positive sense and in a negative sense. So it's one that I definitely felt warranted a conversation, and that's why I wanted to talk about it. So before we get into that, I do just want to ask each of my panelists to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about them. And I'll just pass the microphone over to who's on my right, which is Misty.
Hi, I'm Misty Walker. I am a romance author. I write everything from like sweet and spicy to dark and super steamy. I'm going on my 4th year as a writer, so I feel like I'm still kind of a newbie. Yeah, and that's me.
Well, newbies are always welcome on this channel. So, Mariah, how about you?
Hello, I am Mariah Ankenman, she, her pronouns. I write sassy and swoon-worthy romance. I have cowboys, firefighters, paranormals. My stuff is on the lighter side. A lot of my readers say that I'm a comfort read between their dark romances, which I absolutely love. So if you want sass and humor and also steam and a whole bunch of like nerdiness, I am your gal. I got you.
She's got you. All right, perfect. And over to Briana.
Hi, I'm Briana. I also use she, her pronouns. I'm the owner of Wicked Words, which is an online independent romance bookstore based out of Washington. We just opened this year, but I have been in the book community as a reader for a very long time. I was like back in the when people were book review blogging. That was me as like a small child. So I'm still here. Obviously love romance, and I'm super excited to be here.
That's awesome. And as somebody who lives in Oregon, I am happy to know that there's somebody up in Washington for all my romance needs. Well, ladies, thank you for joining me for this panel. Now, before I ask you each about your experience and or opinions with discrete covers in general, I did just want to kind of give a sort of explanation of where I'm coming from, at least with discrete covers, and feel free to disagree with me. But discrete covers for me is something that I didn't really see emerge until I feel like the uptick in Booktok, especially. And it seems like it was just as much a response to readers wanting something to read discreetly in public, as the name of it implies, but also the love that people have for special edition covers, and the love that people have for collecting every edition of a book that they might love by their favorite author. Now, I'm not talking specifically about illustrated covers. I kind of tend to separate illustrated covers, the cartoon covers, from discrete covers. Am I right in assuming that, or does anybody else kind of have a discrepancy with that?
No, I think that's pretty accurate.
Yeah, I agree. And I would say that for me, like you were talking about the progression, I would say that I feel like that is also part of the progression, was like we recently shifted a lot more towards cartoon covers. And then there was a response of like, oh, this doesn't look super sexy necessarily if it's just a cartoon. It could be like not sexy at all and no one would know. And then that kind of shifted even further into the like ultra discreet, where you don't have people or it's plain.
Yeah, no, I can see that for sure. So I guess I'd just love to turn it over to each of you and ask, what's your general impression of Discrete covers? We'll start with that, and feel free, anybody can jump in.
I love Discrete covers from a collector's standpoint. I love collecting books. I don't ever read my paperbacks. They just sit on my pretty shelf and stay there. So I like them for like that aspect of it, but I do think that, you know, it is hard to tell the spice level from the Discrete covers. I have, like my biker series, I had many people request me for a Discrete cover, and so that's the only ones that I have released so far are for my biker books.
And I think, and not to cut in, but I do think that that's something that we've also had conversations about when talking about illustrated covers versus like cover model covers, is the idea of how can you tell a spice level from an illustrated cover. I remember when we were first starting to see the cartoon covers that everybody sort of was like, wait a second, I didn't realize how sexy this was going to be when I opened it, because I saw these two charming cartoons on the cover. So it's interesting that that dialogue has sort of now also transitioned into Discrete covers as well. But I'll step back now and continue.
Well, I agree with what you're saying, because I feel like the old saying, don't judge a book by your cover. I think especially with romance books, Romancelandia, people can absolutely judge a book by the cover, and people relied on it for a long time. You know, is there a man chest? Okay, this is going to be a super sexy book. Is it just, you know, a cartoon? Okay, this is going to be more maybe geared towards women's fiction and not necessarily romance. It's going to be funny maybe. And then I feel like they all got mixed up, and everyone was just trying to appease what was the hot new trend now, instead of giving like a preview of what was inside the book with the cover, you know? Because I feel like what was on the cover used to represent what was in the book, and it kind of stopped doing that. And now it's just like, what's the hot new thing? Okay, put that on the cover. And it's confusing a lot of readers.
And we know... Oh, go ahead, Briana.
Oh no, that was me.
That
Sorry.
was me.
I'm sorry. I was looking at Briana. Go ahead, Misty.
And if for as many people who like to say that they want Discrete covers, from an author standpoint, I have had covers without man chest, without, you know, that are less sexy. They don't sell as well. They just don't, for me at least. So I can see why having an addition of a Discrete cover, but for an ebook, I don't see any other way. If you're going to have a spicy book, it has to show that it's spicy. At least in my experience, they don't sell as well.
And you brought up another good point, ebook versus print book, because obviously, you know, the bookstores, Barnes and Noble and all them, they don't really like to show the man chest, but they do. The people are like, they won't ever put it on the shelves. Go to a Barnes and Noble, look on the shelves. They're there. They're there. They're just not going to be on those tables out front. That's where you're going to have your Discrete covers with like the crowns and the flowers and you know, the cartoony people too.
Yeah.
But they'll have the books. But yeah, I really feel like an ebook, especially if you're writing steamy, it has to portray steamy, because
so that's what's interesting to me is, like, obviously we talked about, you know, people were creating illustrated covers, not only because, you know, they're cute, they're colorful. I think the colorful appeal does, I know it works on me, but that it was providing an alternative. And then we kind of saw that also segueing into the more Discrete covers, usually with objects or a lot of florals. But I think we're only seeing those when we're talking about super spicy, steamy books, where you would otherwise have traditionally a male model or a couple on the covers. So it's interesting. I like the idea of them coexisting. I like the idea just as much as I love the idea of illustrated covers and male, female, whoever model covers existing. But I think the question is, when we start to have then conversations on Booktok, like I know I've seen in the last month or so, where people are saying they want to replace, they no longer want to see cover models on the covers of books. That to me is when we start to have, at least when I start to have issues, is just sort of this idea of we have to replace something completely with something else, as opposed to everything coexisting. But then also I can look at it from like the author point of view, where it becomes more work for every author to then not only design one cover, and I'm in the process of designing my first cover right now, and I can't imagine having to do multiple covers for a single book. So, I mean, it's so interesting when you examine it from both the author point of view, the reader point of view, and the book sales point of view. And thankfully, we have all three of those represented here in this panel. So, Briana, I'd love to hear from you as somebody who works in book sales. If Discrete covers, how that's affected, I guess, sort of like the world of selling romance.
Yeah, I will say I have some pretty aggressively mixed views when it comes to Discrete covers for a lot of reasons. But one of them is what you guys have been talking about, is that people 100% judge a book by a cover, especially if they are like in person, where there's like a time pressure element and they feel like they have to quickly like figure out what's in front of them and then like figure out which direction to go in. And I have customers come up, because we do pop-up events, so sometimes I see customers in person too, and we have customers come up all the time who will literally say the exact quote of, I know I shouldn't judge a book by a cover, but I'll be honest, I do. And I was thinking about this last week. Our pop-ups people make some interesting observations. We had one guy, like, I think younger than me, come up and he was like, oh, so you sell mostly kids books? And I was like, no, actually, we don't have any kids books out. And he was like, oh my God, when did book covers get so fun? I didn't know book covers were like fun like this, because he just saw all the colors and things, because we have, I don't know, 50% of like illustrated rom-com-y covers and like 50% not. And was just like, oh, fun colors and covers. It's a children's book. And his girlfriend was like, yeah, that's kind of the fun thing, is like, no one will ever know how spicy it is, which I do get that. And I'm all for like, if that's what's going to make you comfortable and help like open that doorway to you getting more and more comfortable with like your sexuality and what you read, great. But at the same time, if the reason that we're replacing it, or we're doing a full replacement, is because we don't want people to know, feels like a regression to me of like back to, and also the language we use sometimes when talking about Discrete covers and even romance, like clean and stuff, implies that it's dirty or wrong the other way. But also people will look at the cover, and if the blurb doesn't make it clear how spicy it's going to be, they buy it. And sometimes that works out. Sometimes that's why you get bad reviews. There will always be people who just leave bad reviews because they don't do their due diligence. But it is a big part of your marketing, and it's how you weed out who's going to be a fit for your book or not, is looking at the cover and the blurb. So if the cover doesn't give off the right vibes, you're not going to be getting it into the hands of the right people, which can be a really big problem for like sales and reviews. But also just people enjoying the book. I will say I was going to bring a copy and I packed it away already for the pop-up tonight, but RM Virtue's Gods of Hunger series is one of my favorite examples probably of Discrete covers that I feel like still give off the audience appropriate vibes, because even though they are object specific, the overall feel of them is still like sexy, sultry, and fits what's in the book, despite it just being an object. Some of the ones that are just a color or just an object suddenly shift and don't feel spicy at all, depending on what they put on the cover. And that I feel like can be a problem for consumers.
I'm going to do my best to bring up a picture of one of RM Virtue's covers just for reference. I can't say that it's going to go well just because I am not as experienced with doing this. So let's see. I'm going to try to do this. Share screen. Yeah, let's do share screen. Okay. Okay. that didn't work. Let's try something else. Technology is fun, y'all. But no, I totally understand where you're coming from, Briana. And I think what we can do as well is, now that you've kind of touched on some of like the positives and negatives behind discrete covers and both the intention and the execution for them, we can let's dive a little deeper and we'll focus specifically on the positives first. Let's talk about why we do appreciate discrete covers, as well as why we think they work for readers, authors, book sales, whatever your field of expertise might be. But first, let's see if I can share my screen. That's going to be the most exciting part of today. So let's see. Share. Let's try it again. Can we do it? Oh, I think I did it. Okay, hold on. Can we see it?
Yes.
Yes.
There we go. So here's an example of RM Virtues, Keep Me Close from the Gods of Hunger series. And I agree. I think you can tell that there's clearly like a darker, sexier aspect, to, at least that's what I would expect. Just while I have this open, I do just want to show you a few other side-by-sides. So Zoe York's Wild at Heart, this was the original cover. She re-released her series with discrete covers, all of which have sort of a vibe similar to this, where it's outdoors, it's got like some beautiful scenery, some reflective of the seasons. Obviously, anybody who's listening to this podcast, you're just going to have to look them up yourself, but I do have these images up in the video on YouTube, as well as Sierra Simone's Priest, which I think is one of the spicier books a lot of people have read and is very widely talked about, recently got a re-release as this version of Priest, which I do think actually, I think this one actually does a pretty good job as well of capturing the vibe. And I think a lot of it goes back to the darker colors, as well as the tagline, I think helps. But yeah, those are the examples that I wanted to share with anybody. Any thoughts on just those covers in general?
I think the reds and blacks are, with the colors, the reds and blacks, I think are very important to portray like steamy romance.
I think you make a good point about like the tagline and the title also. Like if you have a title and or a tagline that inherently feels sexy or romancy, that comes through in addition to the cover image. If your title is like kind of could go into any genre or doesn't inherently feel sexy, then you don't have that like marketing nugget in the cover that is going to tell people that it's that kind of book if you also change the cover image.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Well, let's talk about the positives then. So overall, I'll start. I think, to me, I like the idea as a collector of being able to add to my collection, as Misty does, that sits on our bookshelves that doesn't get read. But I love the idea of being able to collect books from my favorite authors, have different versions of them, different covers. And I think that is one of the things I like the most about discrete covers. I do have some issues with the intention behind them, as well as just the title Discrete. However, that I will save for the drawbacks portion of this conversation. So anybody else, throw out some positives that you have about discrete covers.
I think that the people that do have issues with like taking a paperback out into public and reading it with a spicy cover, I feel like having that option for them is a huge positive.
Absolutely.
But that's going to fall into the negative, so never mind.
And period. It's a huge positive for them, period.
Yeah, I agree. It's a great option for people that, they don't like those covers, or they need to read the book like safely. Like maybe they're in a situation where they can't read a book with that cover because it would be harmful if someone in their life saw them reading that. So it's great that they have, that option. And it's really cool to see what like the artists do with those type of covers. So it's, you know, from an artistic standpoint, it's a really fun way to see how creative they can get conveying a message without any people on the cover. So that's kind of cool and fun.
And just piggybacking off of the artistic aspect, I think it adds some variety as well. Like, I mean, I am all for a man chest. I am all, honestly, I'd love to see more women on covers personally, but I love the illustrated covers, but I think it adds another option. It adds something different on the Barnes and Noble table or wherever you are. You know, this copy of Priest, for example, really caught my eye because of the colors and like the intricate design on it. So yeah, I think there's definitely a beautiful element of the covers as well.
And I think with Booktok, there's been like this reemergence of people wanting paperbacks, because when I first started, paperbacks did not sell nearly as well as they do now. I mean, I make almost 50% of my income just from selling, sorry, we're inverted, signed paperbacks now. And that was not the case before, you know, when Booktok was just beginning. So it is kind of fun to see how many people are now interested in having physical copies. And, you know, like you said, the artistic standpoint is really fun to watch.
Yeah. I mean, how many of us have actually picked up a book, you know, in a bookstore that we chose partly because of how beautiful the cover was? I know I have.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I had someone walk up and I was floored. They just flipped the back of a hardcover, which, first of all, hardcover in today's economy, that's a big investment. And the back is never the blurb. It's always just quotes. They were like, read a few of the quotes and they were like, is this good? And I was like, I've heard good things. And they were like, okay, and bought it. So you definitely have people that like aren't going to look too deeply and will just buy stuff.
Wow. Imagine having the confidence and, let's just say it, the money to be able to buy a hardback novel without reading or hearing anything about it.
Right? Yeah. So I do think that can be, like, as much as we were talking earlier about how like judging a book by its cover can lead you astray, I also think that the discrete covers can have the opposite effect when done right. Like, I think that's one of the perks about those RM Virtues covers, is that it also, like, as much as it feels sexy and sultry, it also leads you into like underworld, like kind of like crime book covers are similar to that look, or like, you know, like it's not fully into the cover trends for some of those other genres that it crosses into, but it has enough that you think about those, which gives you a really full picture of what the content of that book actually is, that you might not have thought about from just having like a shirtless person on the cover. You know, like that might have led you fully into romance and you might not have thought about those other aspects. So I think it really effectively can sell like all of the aspects of a book when done really well. And like you all said, I do think it's a really great opportunity to get people to work up their comfort and confidence with what they read, or just be safe in the environment they're in right now. But
Mariah, I saw you get really excited.
David, hold on 1 second. I've got to grab a visual aid.
Let her grab her visual aid. I'm excited to see what I think you said, like underworld mafia, and she just lit up.
No, I realized as you were saying that, as you were explaining that sometimes people will pick up a book and then like come into the romance world that they never even imagined before. That is literally my story. We didn't have romance books in the house. I wasn't reading them at 13. I was a fantasy reader. Fantasy girl, Terry Brooks, Shannara series Landover, fantasy. I was at the library one day in my mid-20s. I was like 25 at the library. I saw a book. I pulled it out. I saw the cover. It's Dark Side of the Moon by Sherlyn Kenyon. See? You know, you could, it's very dark looking. It's got a guy fully clothed in a trench coat. I'm like, what's this? Oh, it's, you know, this sounds cool. Were Hunters. What's this? So I picked it up. I started reading it. I get to the first spicy scene and I'm like, I think this is a romance novel. And then like I finished the book. I'm like, do I like romance novels? And literally devoured the entire romance section. Like, and that started my love of romance novels.
Yeah.
And like, I just started reading everything, and I started realizing the stories I was writing had heavy romance subplots. And I'm like, well, forget the subplot. That's the whole plot now. So yeah, I did not know this was a romance when I picked it up. I thought the cover looked cool. And so I picked it up and read it, and then went, oh my gosh, this is romance, and I love it. And now I'm converted. Romance lover forever.
I love it. Well, yeah,
so that's what covers can do.
And I mean, as much as we talk about how illustrated covers or discrete covers can sometimes like lead people astray in that, oh, maybe they don't know how spicy a book is going to be when they pick up one of these books. I feel like I've heard just as many people talk about how they picked up a book with a illustrated or object cover in an airport, not knowing how spicy or romantic it was going to be, and then loving it and being like pleasantly surprised in a way like Mariah was with her book that she picked up. So I think it can be both a positive thing for a reader to not have that context, and also it can be a negative thing. It depends on the reader, obviously. So I think these are all great points. And obviously, this is why I wanted to have this conversation, is I don't think it's a very black and white topic. I think that I can see both sides of it. And when you add in the nuance of seeing those sides from a reader, writer, or sales perspective, that also adds to the complications of your feelings about it. So now that we've each kind of touched on some of the positive aspects of discrete covers, let's talk about some of the drawbacks. And I'll let y'all start with this one.
Well, speaking as a traditionally published author, I'm traditionally published with small presses. I don't get to pick my covers. I get a say in my cover. Like, they'll send me a cover art sheet, and I'll get to explain what the story's about, who the characters are, what they look like. I can send them like Pinterest boards and similar covers that I think would get the feel, depending on the publisher, is how much input that you actually get. But I can't have two different covers for readers when they're like, oh, can you, because my covers are pretty, they're the man covers. I love them. Not all my covers, but I love them. I think they're great. But when readers are like, can you give us a discrete cover? I'm like, I can't, because I'm traditionally published. We get one cover. If the book does amazing, then maybe the publisher will do a second print run with like a discrete cover, or maybe you'll get in a book box. But for, authors who are not self-published, we don't have those choices. And so when the readers like get upset with us, it's not in our control. We can't give that to you.
That's a good point. I'm glad you made that point.
Yeah, I'm indie, so I can, put out whatever I want, which is positive and negative, because I'm not good with making decisions, and I am really horrible with like thinking about what I want on a cover. So thank God for graphic designers. But I don't know. I don't think that discrete covers will ever take over. Mm-hmm. I can't see it happening. The people that I see that make these like, very strong stances on, get rid of this and it's so terrible, there are very few of them. And my books would not sell the way that they sell if I switched over to completely discrete. And I'm not prepared at all, but
oh no, take your time.
You, an example of my, if I can reach it. And this one. Okay. All right. So this is my original cover for one of my biker books, Manchest. And then that is my discrete cover, which I still think conveys a pretty strong,
strong tone.
Yeah. Oh, I hate inverted. So I have, the logo for the bikers and then the goblin bell on there, but the discrete cover, it wouldn't sell as many books. It just wouldn't.
Yeah.
No matter how you slice or dice it.
Fair enough. Well, and so here's my thing. This is why I've always been torn on this. And this plays into, what a couple of you have already brought up as far as discrete covers offer a certain level of discretion for readers who maybe don't feel comfortable or safe sharing what they're reading in a public space. I know I've heard this conversation a lot amongst women, especially saying, I don't need one more reason for somebody to come up to me while I'm riding the bus. Like, I don't need one more reason to bring somebody's attention to me when I don't want it, just because the book I'm reading has a man's chest on the cover. And so for that reason, I do understand it. I think it's pure in intention, 100%. However, as we talk about, being proud of reading and writing romance, and as we talk about not being ashamed of, anything related to especially women's sexuality and exploration, it does feel like a step backwards to me. It does feel like discreet can very easily become hiding or like covering something up to me. Like, I think that's in the meaning of the word. And so it's something that I do understand that not everybody is at the same level of feeling comfortable with what they read and talking about it and showing it to friends, family, and strangers alike. Not as comfortable as I am, obviously, because I'll read this at the airport. But it's a double-edged sword for me in that I feel like it has a good intention, but that also that intention maybe has a drawback to it as well. So that's why I've always kind of been of two minds as a reader when it comes to discrete covers, but that's me.
Yeah, I like going off of that. I will also say that like my other thing is I don't feel like there is a need to like have a discrete option of everything or like go fully that way. Like other people mentioned, it might not sell as well, those things, but also you have so many options if you aren't comfortable with that. Like putting it on your Kindle, or, they make book sleeves and dust jackets and things that you can cover it with, or choosing another book when you're out in public and only reading those when you're in a safe space, different things like that. So like while the discrete covers can be a nice like additional option for people, I don't feel like people are without options right now. And then my other drawback, in addition to what you just said, is it breaks my heart a little bit because I think about the intense like loss of opportunity for rep on covers. So for different body types, for different, different kinds of couples, different kinds of love, for different races and ethnicities, all of those things, once you take the people off, you can't have a person that looks like you on the cover to be like representative for that community, which makes me really sad. And that is one of the things I love about like the illustrated covers, is that now you don't have to rely on having stock photos, which we're slowly trying to update like what stock photos you can get. But like we're still kind of stuck in olden times when it comes to stock photos and models and things, which is how you get people on covers. For those of you who don't know, people use like stock images. Not everyone can afford to like go do a themed photo shoot for their book cover. And so it makes it really limited about what you could put on your cover. So going the illustrated route opened a lot of doors for making characters that look like the actual characters and putting them on the cover. And I've seen a few discrete cover options that went from having a cover that offered a certain kind of rep to having a cover that didn't have any people on it, and fully went that way, not just had it as an option, which does make me kind of sad because, you can get used books, but sometimes it's hard to track them down and they're not sitting on that shelf in that store, like showing that representation off to everyone that goes by.
Yeah,
very good point.
That's an interesting point too, because it does make me wonder if people are making that choice consciously to choose not to have any kind of physical representation of people on the cover, whether it's a I want to play things safe kind of route. Like I want to make sure that I'm not having a false representation of somebody on my cover, or if it's, I don't know what the other reason would be. Like, but I mean, it is interesting to make that like full choice of like, this is what I'm going with, because I'm with you. I like to see people on the cover, whether they're illustrated or not, and already have an idea of what these people look like before I even get started reading. But I know that people would disagree with that. And I know a lot of people who are very adverse to reading model cover books just in general, or illustrated cover books just in general, because they don't want to picture somebody. They don't want an image given to them. They want to be able to picture whatever they want to picture, whoever they want to picture when reading. So I don't think you're ever going to appease everyone. I think it's impossible to do that. And kind of like what you were talking about as well, Briana, about we have choices. I'm wondering if, playing devil's advocate here, it's if I have the choice between a discrete cover and a non-discrete cover, I don't have to pick the discrete cover. You know, I mean, like I get it. I can pick the the man chest on the cover, and I usually do. But people who don't necessarily want to read the man chest cover, their options are somewhat limited to then also having to have a Kindle and read it digitally. But that's still a choice. I mean, that is still an option. It's just, it's a tough one. It's a tough one in that I feel like everybody does get their choices, but I feel like it also goes back on the author then to have to provide all of these choices in order to make that happen. And, you know, Misty, I'm sure I'm curious, Misty, what's been your experience with people like requesting discrete covers? And, you know, I mean, has that been something that people have pushed very, very hard for?
Oh yeah, discrete and hardcover, both.
Hardcover too.
Yeah, I get comments on most of my TikTok videos asking for them, but I will say that they ask for them, but as far as sales have gone, I don't know if I'll ever make my money back. It's very expensive to have covers done in the first place, but it's very expensive to have, you know, 2 sets of covers when you have a 5-book series. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I'll make my money back with it, because the demand was there. The follow through, not so much. Not yet, anyway.
Yeah. I call myself a greedy reader all the time, because I'm definitely one of those readers who, like, it's difficult for me to read like the first book in a series and then have to wait like, you know, months for the next one. And I'm like, well, Kelly, you're a writer too. You understand that they're writing the book. Like, it takes time and there's all this extra stuff that goes into it after the book is even written. So I, you know, argue with myself as far as that goes. But I think readers, because nowadays we have such instant access to our books, as well as to the people who write them via Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, Facebook, we almost have this demanding nature of whatever I'm asking for, you should be providing it to me, because like I'm the customer. And so if I want another book cover, what do you mean you can't do that? If I want, you know, an extra addition to this book, well, of course you're going to do that for me. So I think that because of our instant access to books and the authors, that's kind of added this extra greedy element onto readers who immediately think that authors will be able to satisfy our every whim demand.
And I think that book boxes also kind of help out with that, because, you know, if you cannot provide a different cover, there are always book boxes that will have you on there and do your cover for you. And then, you know, you can have that as an option. But book boxes, you know, as you all know, are very, very popular these days.
I think, like, as a reader, it's very easy to see changing a cover as like a simple thing, especially because of seeing book boxes put out new covers all the time. And ebooks or audiobooks where you're like, what do you mean? You just like swap out the image, like you just click on your computer and it's a different image. Like, and especially because the publishing industry, indie or otherwise, is so complex that like a lot of people have no concept of how it works, and there's not like a lot of transparency or access to that information. Although there is more now that people are talking about publishing more and more. It's very easy to be like, oh, it's so simple. Like, why would you not just offer both or swap it out? But like you were saying with choices, like it costs a lot. It's a lot of work. But then also that's why sometimes, like Mariah was saying, especially for traditionally published books, they just switch. Like they just stop printing one, and at least for a while, and now you're printing another one. So yeah, technically both covers are out there in the world somewhere. But it also means that for bookstores, if the first print run sold out, I can no longer buy that book to stock it. So it will never be in my store, because your only option is used or sitting on some other store's shelf still that hasn't sold yet. And so then it's not really as easy of a choice. It's not about just clicking to buy one or the other, or walking into a store and seeing them both next to each other and picking up one instead of the other. It becomes a little bit harder than that. Or you have to like snag that book box before it sells out to make sure that you get that opportunity. So while choices are there, they can be hard to offer and also hard to take advantage of in either direction, whether you want Discrete or not.
Yeah. I will say those limited edition covers on books in book boxes have sold me on book boxes before. Like, and although I will say, I don't know if any of them were actually Discrete covers that I was so interested in getting. But one thing that I haven't seen happen, but correct me if I'm wrong, is I haven't seen somebody go from Discrete, usually object or design cover, to then a new edition of that book with a, let's say, sexier cover. I haven't seen that. Have you, Briana?
Katie Robert. Katie Robert has gone back and redone clinch style covers for some of hers that were originally object. But she's also like done the reverse and done lots of different things and does.
She's done everything because she's amazing.
Yeah, like I feel like she is kind of a unicorn in this because
I think
like
CM Niscosta also has done that with a couple of those books as well, for like Morning Glory Milking Farm.
I think
I clicked that book box. I clicked purchase so fast. I stayed awake. I was refreshing the screen. I mean, I can't wait to get that one.
So talk about something. Go ahead.
I also think, thinking about Katie Roberts, I'm pretty sure her clinched ones were a Kickstarter. Like I think she crowdfunded. So that also, like, where we're talking about choices and like having the resources to make it in the first place or having the demand for it, like she definitely had to plan it right to make that an option.
That's an interesting way to go about it too, then, because you're actually having, if you're going through like Kickstarter, you're having someone directly fund that book. So like, I know when Misty mentioned that a lot of people have requested Discrete covers, but then not necessarily seeing like a direct, sales for them, that the Kickstarter route, it does seem like, well, if you're paying to fund something with the expectation that you're getting some sort of product in return, that maybe that is another way to go about doing that. And, have the people who actually want a specific cover being the ones funding that specific cover.
Or Patreon. My bestie, Kay Webster, she has a Patreon, and every single month she's giving her patrons, Discrete covers that are beautiful, like gold foil and diamond printing and
awesome.
Yeah, absolutely gorgeous. But that's a very good way of doing it because there is no extra cost per se for her. She's getting the money up front and then, doing that.
I like this route. I like this idea. I feel like this solves a lot of problems for me in like people wanting like an extra cover or a specific cover design okay, well then help me buy it. Like
Yeah.
help me
Yeah.
fund having that design for you. I think that's a great compromise for everybody.
Yeah. Very true.
One thing I did want to ask is, has there ever been an instance where you've preferred the Discrete cover over the original cover for a book? If you have any examples or ideas of ones that you can think of.
I'm a man chest lover. I can't imagine ever wanting something other than like, or a sexy couple. Like that's just me. I can't imagine wanting something else over that.
Yeah, same. I don't think discreet is ever a word that's been used to describe me personally. I will be straight out in public reading the book with half naked people on it, and someone makes a snide comment, and I will just make a snide comment right back at them. I don't care. You can't hurt me. Try it. I'm not taking your foolishness. That's just me. I like seeing the people on the front. A big fan of that. I also like shocking people, I guess, too. Being like, what? I'm reading romance. Say something. What are you going to say? Let's go. I got facts. On the sales numbers. Come on, let's have a discussion.
And not to like dive into it deeper, but there was a TikTok recently going around where the woman was talking about, what am I supposed to do? Just have this cover in front where my kids can see it? And that just like, I've never been so angry.
Yeah. Well, and
because I have children. I would never hide that from them. I'm very sex positive with them. We have conversations about it constantly. I never would hide what I do, or, I have a lot of religious trauma. So shame is never something that I want my children to feel. So I would never hide that from them either.
Same.
Yeah, that comes up all the time at markets because it's almost always the kids that run up and are like, oh my God, books. And then you get two different parent reactions. There's the parent who realizes it's not kids' books, but like is just going to see how this goes. And usually the kids ignore the books at that point because they look at them, they're like, oh, these aren't cool because they don't have exciting kid stuff on them and are looking at stickers and stuff. And then you have the parents who are like, those aren't for you. Those are adult. No, like no.
Little Timmy.
And literally, not even intentionally, but I think right now we don't even have any covers out that like have anyone half naked on them or anything. We just don't have any right now. And so I'm always like, what? Like, what are they gonna see? But also, you have to remember kids are kids. So while you see that and think like, ooh, sexy, like a kid might not. They might just be like, oh, that's weird. Why isn't that dude wearing a shirt? And like move on from it. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of times like adults put adult level thoughts and feelings onto children. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of things kids literally don't care. There was a kid and a mom who got in a fight about a chili pepper bookmark because the kid really wanted it. And the mom was like, you don't know what it means. And I do. And I was like, yeah, but to them it's a chili pepper. Why can't it just be friends are going to see it be a chili pepper? Like,
yeah, I have two daughters who are still in elementary school, and I have my book backpack that I wear to conferences and stuff in the house with my book cover on it. It's a backpack. It's in the house. I have posters of my books up, and you know what they say? They say, Mommy, why doesn't he have a shirt on?
Yeah.
He needs a shirt. Mm-hmm. You should put horses on your cover. I'm like, thank you, honey. I will keep that in mind. Like, people like horses, Mommy. Like, you see a person without their shirt on, and then they go, no, there should be horses on that firefighter cover. Because that makes sense. They're not thinking anything inappropriate because they're kids. Stop trying to make kids adults.
And that's the thing is like, I'm very much, my TikTok is basically a clutter of book talk, fat talk, and political TikTok. And it's all, you see this same conversation happening across almost all of these, where it's people saying, oh, we can't talk about these things with kids. Like, let kids be kids. Kids can't have, they can't be exposed to certain things. you're the one sexualizing kids. You're the one politicizing something for kids when it doesn't need to be that way. It can just be, here's a book cover. Guess what? You don't want to read it, and kids aren't going to want to read it. Then don't. Like, I mean, you don't need to make a big deal out of everything. And because by doing so, you are ingraining that idea of shame and guilt into kids, so that when they do grow up and see a romance cover at Walmart, they're like, oh, I can't read that. That's not something that's supposed to be on covers. That's what I've been taught my whole life. Like, you hide that. And then we get this whole cyclical nature of coming back to the shame and the guilt and soothing that with discreet covers. And so it's mind-boggling to have this conversation with readers of romance in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s, in that I feel like we've all, for the most part, had a very similar journey in one way or another. And a lot of that is that we've attached shame and guilt to romance novels because they're so blatant and open about what to expect. And a lot of that comes back to the cover. Mm-hmm. I could stand on my soapbox for another hour. Like, it's just, I mean, it's just wild. I mean, it all comes down to read what you want to read. And if you want to read the cover with the man chest, read it. If you want to read the cover, I know Kate Canterbury just put out like a really cute cover for a book that she has coming up that's got like jam on the cover. I'm like, that looks cute too. So it's whatever appeals to you, but there's no reason to shame anybody for their choices, especially when you're not even talking about the book itself, but the artwork on the front.
Yeah.
Ridiculous. Anyway.
It's such a small part of the book, but it's such a big part of the conversation, you know?
Yes.
Yeah.
And
it's wild.
I think that goes back to like what we were talking about before, where people do judge books by cover. I will tell you the two things that sell a book the most without me intervening somehow is the cover and the blurb. The cover is what gets them to pick it up. If they flip it over, and I love my indie authors, but this happens sometimes with the indie authors. Sometimes their blurb is very vague. And they flip it over, read the blurb, and they're like, I can't tell what I'm getting into with this, and they'll put it back. So like, those do matter a lot. And so it's easy to talk about them a lot. And also, like you said, other people around you are observing the cover. They might not see the blurb, but they are observing the cover and might have interactions with you based off of it. Some people might recognize the book and talk to you about the content, but that percentage is like less. So it makes sense that the cover is such a big conversation point.
Yeah. Yeah. No, agreed. That's honestly, blurb writing could be a whole other discussion that we have on
I don't even
Tit
want
Talk.
to. My blood pressure will rise.
You know what, Misty, I'm in the process of writing my first blurb, and it's much harder than I think anybody thinks it is. But
so
I did find there was a conversation on Twitter that I did save that was like talking about different elements of blurb writing. So I have found that to be extremely helpful. But yeah, it's I'm going through the self-publishing process myself right now and coming across so many things that I didn't think about from the reader perspective. So I think that definitely alters a lot of what you think about when it comes to the cover, the blurb, you know, the trigger warnings, like everything related to the book, aside from the actual writing of the book. I mean, because there's so many more components. And you know, we've just talked about the cover today, and that alone has taken us almost an hour of discussion. And I'm sure we could continue talking about that. So if anything, this is just a reminder to readers out there that there are so many different moving pieces that go into creating a book. The cover is just one of them. And that alone has so much power with the sale of the book. And, you know, it takes a lot of work to create a single cover, let alone multiple covers. Mm-hmm. So all the power to all of the authors. So thank you both for sharing, you know, your thoughts, both from like a traditionally published and indie published perspective. And Briana, it's been wonderful listening from your perspective as somebody in book sales, because I'd love to hear from indie book sales people more often personally.
Yeah, for sure.
Yay. Well, ladies, anything, any final comments on the subject before we wrap up and share where the lovely people can find and follow you?
Let people enjoy the covers they like. That's just
Yeah.
like, just be nice. If someone prefers a certain cover, like, don't shame
Let
them
them
for
read
liking
it.
their, yeah, let them read it. Let them enjoy.
100%.
Yeah.
Ditto to that. And if you're ever like unsure about what something contains, because the cover and the blurb could go either way, like look at reviews or go into an indie bookstore and talk to the booksellers there. And we can help you out immensely with that. So you have options if you're feeling like, I don't know what I'm getting into and I would like to know. It just takes a little bit of work, and that's okay. You should always look into the things that you're
Due
consuming.
diligence.
So yeah.
I agree. I think there's definitely a reader responsibility to, you know, I mean, I know that a lot of choices, when it comes to at least the indie market, they're being made by the author. But like Mariah said, she doesn't get a choice when it comes to her book covers. So there's a lot, there's only so much that the person writing the book can do as far as providing a clear context for what you're about to read. But I think there is a reader responsibility to do some research as well, especially if you're just going to go and leave a bad review because you didn't get what you thought you were going to get. So I completely agree with you, Briana. Okay. Well, now I've kind of wrapped up the discussion. I'd love if everybody could just share what's coming up for you. Do you have any recent or upcoming releases, as well as where everybody can find and follow you? So, Briana, let's start with you.
Okay, yeah. So the shop is on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok, all at Shop Wicked Words. That is also our website. If you do shopwickedwords.com is our website. We ship anywhere in the US. International people can send me a message and I can figure it out, but usually it doesn't work in your favor. So international shipping is a nightmare right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then Romance Bookstore Day is August 20th. So I haven't put out a ton of stuff about that yet, but my birthday is also that week. So we'll be doing tons of sales and like different virtual events and things. So keep an eye out for all of those.
That's amazing. Happy early birthday. And yes, check out Romance Bookstore Day. I know there's events happening all over the place, both virtually and in person. So everybody look it up, see what you can find near you. Mariah, how about you?
You can find me online. My website is just mariahankenman.com. I'm also on Facebook, Twitter, Insta, and TikTok at Mariah Ankenman. That's me. I love TikTok. I'm on there all the time. I have the third book in my Firefighter series. The Firefighter's Dilemma is coming out in October. Yay! And then I also have novellas in the Happily Ever After collective and one in a charity anthology called I Am the Fire. That one's coming out in November. And the links to all those are on my website or also the bio of any of my social medias.
Amazing. And also Mariah just went viral on TikTok because we found out that she and her husband look exactly the same if Mariah had a beard.
It was so funny. I posted it on a whim at like 10 o'clock on Saturday night thinking, maybe a few people will see this. It's at 21 million views. I didn't even know.
Wild.
It's like, it's making a lot of people laugh though, so I'm happy because that's what I'm here for, spreading joy. And don't worry, everyone, we've done our DNA tests. We're not related. It's fine. I just look like him with a beard, okay?
She just took a DNA test.
I'm 100% not related to my
Not her husband.
I will compliment you on how you twisted that around back to your book because I thought that was genius.
Yes, because everyone's like, Sweet Home Alabama, you guys are brother and sister. And so I did Sweet Home Alabama. I was like, well, I did write a book where step siblings fall in love.
That was perfection.
Well,
We're
honestly.
like,
this is
yeah.
why you've been one of my favorite people to follow on TikTok for over a
Yeah.
year now.
Bringing it back. Yes.
Kill
Take
me.
advantage
Kill
of
me.
that.
Misty is also on TikTok, and her stuff is fantastic. And I love watching you pack boxes, like packing books to send to people, because Misty also has quite the collection of stickers. But I'll let you tell them about it.
I do. I have somehow formed this huge following of people that like to watch me pack orders. So it's amazing because I love packing orders. I feel like I'm kind of giving people a gift, which is why I wrap it up, and include tons of fun swag. I'm addicted to making stickers. So
Good.
inverted. You can kind of see it there. I have a book coming out September 21st. It is a reverse age gap. It's a daughter's roommate. So I'm very, very excited about that. I'm starting a series called Songs of Sin, where I take forbidden songs and turn them into books. So this one is Gracie's mom, Stacy's mom.
I love that.
And they're just kind of like shorter, kind of palate cleansing, super, super smutty books. So I'm really excited about those. I can't wait. And on my socials, I am author Misty Walker everywhere.
Perfect.
Everywhere.
Easy. Keep it simple.
AuthorMistyWalker.com. All of that.
I love it. B, I saw you just joined us. We are wrapping up. However, this will be available for anybody that's watching now or tuned in late. This video will live on YouTube, so you can always come back and watch the discussion, add any comments you want. And this will also be released as a podcast episode later in the month of August. So if you prefer an audio format, that's great. Although I will say, because we talked a lot about covers and used some examples, this is definitely a visual Tit Talk episode. So I would recommend the YouTube version, but that's just me. So it's been so lovely chatting with all three of you. I'm Kelly from Boobies and Noobies, but you can listen to Boobies and Noobies wherever you stream the rest of your podcasts. You can actually listen to Boobies and Noobies on YouTube if you prefer to do that. You won't have the lovely visual that you have before you here. However, it does exist on YouTube. Boobiesandnoobies.com, at Boobies Podcast, across platforms except TikTok, because they think I'm creating porn by having the name Boobies in my username. So I am Boobies Podcast with 2 zeros instead of O's. Oh, TikTok. But thanks everybody for joining in. I'll be announcing our next Tit Talk in the upcoming weeks. However, I can tell you that it always takes place the second Saturday of the month. I'm very excited about the topic for the next one. It's going to be on the spicier side. So stay tuned for that. But in the meantime, thanks everybody for watching and or listening. And of course, to my lovely guests, thank you for being here with me.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Yay!